Hi, my name is Harry Kirschner, and I'm a recovered alcoholic. And as a result of good sponsorship, following the clear-cut directions as directed in the Big Book, taking these steps once again as directed in the Big Book, I've had a spiritual awakening and I have recovered. Since then, I have not found it necessary. I have not had the slightest notion to take any potions or lotions to quiet my inner commotion caused by erratic emotions. That's the one thing I rehearsed. Other than that, I'm winging it. You know, I came to talk tonight about spiritual principles. And before I get onto that, you know, I just want to do some personal house cleaning. You know, if I say anything to offend anybody, believe me, it's not my intent. You know, it just comes off that way. I didn't drive 115 miles from southeast Kent to offend or piss anybody off. You know, but we are all ultra-sensitive creatures. And I know when I'm sitting in a meeting and when somebody says something which I agree with, my approval meter of that guy goes way up. And then as soon as he starts to say something I disagree with, now I approve. He's an asshole. See? Because, you know, and that's me. And I've been around long enough to know if I do it, I can only imagine some of you are doing it. Because, you know, we have all gone through this program, and life experiences has led us all to various conclusions as to how things should be, or how things are or ought to be. And anytime I come in and say something which may or may not jive with your point of view, you know, you're setting yourself up to a resentment for me. You know, I won't know about it unless you tell me. And you can, but just don't tell me tonight. You know? But I'm only here to share my experience. And I got to tell you, even that doesn't wash. Because it's possible for two people to share the very same experiences, yet draw two entirely different conclusions and lessons out of it. You know? So just me coming here and sharing my experience doesn't always jive. And I'll give you a great example. You know, I did a chair in Ashford, about a year ago. And I was given about 25 minutes, and all I did was talk about the importance of working these steps as directed out of the Big Book, you know, and the program of recovery, because it works. It has proven to work. And once we vary from it, you know, that's when we get into Chinese whispers and problems. And most of the people really latched onto it, but then one guy said, well, I've been here for 23 years. I've been sober for 23 years, and I've never worked the steps, and I've never read the book. Well, you see, that's his experience. But what the hell is he doing here? He doesn't need this. He was able to do it without reading the book and taking the steps. I don't take myself at all seriously. I really don't, you know. But I take this program of recovery very seriously, because I really do believe each and every one of us, no matter how far down the scale we have gone, if you're sitting in this room tonight, we are all redeemable, and we are worthy of redemption. But in order to redeem ourselves, we need to be given the right message by the right person who can guide us through the right process. Anything short of that, you know, I think is really kind of my point of view, terribly unfortunate and goddamn disgraceful. Because we are talking about people's lives. And if somebody cared enough to save my life from me by showing me the clear-cut directions and guiding me responsibly, that's what I tried to do myself. You know, and we see all these illnesses still going on in the rooms. None of us come into Alcoholics Anonymous with only one problem. I certainly didn't. You know, I came in with a number of substance addictions. If it wasn't cocaine, no, cocaine. It wasn't heroin, it was alcohol. If it wasn't alcohol, it was cannabis. If it wasn't cannabis, it was tobacco. If it wasn't tobacco, it was sugar. Then, of course, there's caffeine and food. Any one of these things will alter my mood. And I found that once I stopped drinking, my cigarette consumption went way up, as did my coffee consumption. You see? And then when I started to arrest that, I had other compulsions, like gambling is one. I'm not a gambler because I'm too damn cheap. I just hate losing money without having anything to show for it. But other forms of behavioral compulsions are workaholism, exercising, you see, all this compulsive stuff. And if I don't do that, then I also get into thought addictions. I become rigid in my thinking, you see. I become a perfectionist, very judgmental. And of course, the big one is codependency, people addictions. How we look for, personal gratification, how we try to get our needs met through other people. Usually sex, and if it's not sex, it's through friendships. I can honestly tell you, I didn't make friends, I took hostages. That's what I did, because I did not want people to leave me. So I didn't just come into the fellowship with one problem. And I found as I started to address different things, others came up which I needed to look at. Because it's not just mind-altering substances I had to address, it's also mood-altering behaviors. Because if I indulge myself excessively in any one of the things that I've just mentioned, it could be just as costly, it could be just as detrimental to my family because I'm not paying attention to them. I'm out doing whatever it is I want to do to fill the hole in my soul. And the only way to fill that hole in my soul is through a God of my understanding. Now, I never had a problem believing in God. I never had a problem. I came from America. It's written on our money. In God we trust. So as a kid, I was always given this concept that there is a God. The questions I asked, well, is he Catholic or Jewish? Or is he Protestant? In those days, those were the only three religions I knew of that existed. Episcopalian, I couldn't even pronounce. Muslim didn't exist. Hindu was, I had one friend who was Hindu, but these are the questions. Okay, there is a God, but is he Catholic, Jewish, or Protestant? Didn't hear about any other religions. But I did believe that there was a God. So it wasn't a problem for me when I came in and I saw God on the steps. I said, okay. My problem was I was afraid that you guys would try to force me to believe in a God of your conception. I already had one of mine. I really didn't understand what he, she, they, it was. But I did have an idea that there was a God in charge in my life. You see, I believed. What I didn't have was faith. I lacked the faith. There's a real difference between believing in something and having faith in something. And my sponsor tells a wonderful story. The guy says, I'm going to cross Niagara Falls on a tightrope with a wheelbarrow. And the guy says, well, I believe you. Having faith is being willing to sit in the wheelbarrow as the guy does it. You see, there's a real difference. So I believed in God. But the idea that God was actually going to run my life, and even early on, I figured, okay, God, you could handle all this. But in far as romance and finance, I'll still hold true to that. And what I required was an emotional breaking. Some of us come in and we get the educational variety. I like to say I was too stupid to get the educational variety, but that's not the truth. The truth is I'm much too smart for it. Because throughout my life, I was given little bits of information of the educational nature, which I was able to discount or disregard or just completely put aside because it interfered with what I wanted to do. I am a type A personality. I am egocentric to the core. I am selfish to the core, suffering from 100 forms of fear, self-delusion, self-pity, and self-seeking. That's me. You see? And what I required was an emotional breaking. And when I experienced that emotional breaking, I experienced for the first time in my life, when I found myself on the floor in my living room, crying out to God, help me, please help me. My life is unmanageable. For the very first time in my life, I experienced a real gut level self-honesty, which is the principle behind step one. Now, some people, I've seen it, surrender. And I can understand that also. But you see, what I don't like about surrender is, how do I practice surrender in all my daily affairs? See, I can see how surrender works. I'm surrendering to this God. I'm surrendering to the idea that I can't drink anymore. But how do I apply the word surrender? It doesn't work for me. But self-honesty really does. Because if I'm going to be honest with anybody else, I have to get honest with myself. We talk about, finding a person who knows the facts about himself, who is familiar with the facts about himself. Well, how can a person do that without rigorous self-honesty? And that's something that we develop along the way. That's something that I had to develop along the way. I really didn't understand self-honesty. I understood my needs, but then as I got older, I had wants, and I sort of like mixed them up. I decided, what a want was, and I decided my want was a need, you see, and that's when I started to develop preferences. And if I didn't get what I want, I would start to act out and manipulate. But you see, for me, I experienced that emotional breaking. And for the first time in my life, I experienced self-honesty. Now, this is where a dictionary really comes in handy. And by the way, I have 75 of these sheets. So you are all willing, if you want one, they're here. And on the front side are the 12 spiritual principles, and on the back side are the 7 deadly sins. Things that get in my way. Probably you too. But honesty, as defined in our Big Book Dictionary, absence of pretense or deception. Absence of pretense or deception. Open, frank, candid, upright in principle and action, genuine, good, respectable, fair, true, clear, unreserved. Self-honesty. Even speaking of those beautiful things uplifts me. But that's what I experienced when I did my first step. Yeah, I surrendered. Yeah, it was a breaking experience. But you see, I did my step 2 at the same time. Step 1 and 2 for me was a package deal. I said, God, help me. Please help me. My life is unmanageable. So I believed in this God. I turned, I believed in this God of my understanding, and I had actually asked God for help. Step 2, I came to believe that there was a power greater than me that could restore me to soundness of mind. I don't like the word insanity. We mess it up here. Oh, insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and not learning. No, that's stupidity. If sanity is soundness of mind, insanity is just the opposite. And funnily enough, when I was looking for definitions for some of these things, I really didn't know what the word meant, but I knew what the opposite word meant. So, for me, when I experienced my step 1 and 2, not only did I experience this self-honesty, this gut-level self-honesty that I had never experienced before, but at the very same time, I experienced hope. I heard the voice of God that one time. He said, one more time, one more time. It was a male's voice. I never heard it since, but I knew exactly what that meant because I had made so many false promises, so many broken promises, and all I ever did was just break them. But this time I was on the floor and I was crying and there was nobody around. And I wasn't afraid. I said, God help me. I was broke. I had that white light experience. That's what I needed. And when I did that and I heard the voice of God, I experienced hope. And the spiritual principle behind step 2 is hope. And as it's very simple, sensing an optimistic feeling towards a positive result or future outcome, becoming confident in one's salvation or ability to succeed. See, once I gave up that part that I knew I couldn't do anymore and just asked for that help, I experienced, and of course I heard the voice. So, there wasn't much to it. I experienced that. And then I had to look for a sponsor because I didn't know what the hell that third step meant. What do you mean, turn my will and my life over to the care of God? I thought I knew all this stuff. Until I experienced my first and second step, I didn't know anything. And I found a sponsor. You see? And he had me read the big book, and then he read it with me up until chapter to How It Works. And we read How It Works together. Very important. Very important. That's hands-on sponsorship. And he'd point out different things to me just so I understood what the hell we were talking about. And then he said, so are you ready to turn your will and your life over to the care of God as you understand them? I said, yes. Now, I have to be honest. I really didn't understand the mechanics. I didn't know what it meant to turn my will and my life over to the care of God. But I knew the necessity because it was in the steps. And I've heard other people in the room say that's what they did. So I did it. And the spiritual principle behind step 3 is faith. Faith. And listen to this definition. A firm belief in something for which there is no logical, material, or absolute proof. Belief in the truth, value, or trustworthiness of an idea, principle, person, or thing. Reliance and or an allegiance to a higher power, God. Did God exist? You hear people, I know there's no God. Well, I happen to believe there is. And they can't prove to me any more that there isn't a God as I can prove to them that there is. All I have is my experience, and I'm more lucky than they are because I come into these rooms and I have witnessed hundreds of people that have experienced that step 3, not really knowing what they were doing. They were doing it on blind faith. They just had this belief that by turning themselves over to this idea, this concept, this God, this higher power, that they will find their salvation, and I have seen it in the rooms. You see? So for me, I can prove there is a God. Just by the results I see on the faces of the people that come in here. Already, what's your length of sobriety? 16 years, 18 years, 19 years, 20 years. My date of sobriety is May 24th, 1993. And if I don't die by May 24th, 2013, I'll have 20 years of continuous sobriety. Now, I don't say that as an ego trip, because it's not. You see, what I'm really saying is I had a spiritual awakening in 1993, and for the past 19 years and 6 months, I've been working very hard not to fall back asleep, because it's easy to do. I've seen it happen all over, and that's why we have to practice these principles, and that's what we're getting into. So the spiritual principle behind step 3, as I experienced, was faith. And then step 4 is courage. Why? Now, and we've all heard it, so many people come up with these bullshit fears about step 4. They project as if they're going to find out that they were an axe murderer or some closet homosexual. They're just afraid to look at themselves. That, and the spiritual principle behind step 4 is courage. It does take courage to really go back as far as you can, because that's what the book tells me to do. We went back through our lives. Nothing counted but thoroughness and honesty. And I got to tell you, I don't agree with us. I'm giving this guy 2 weeks to do his 4th step. No. Then he's doing my will. I think the 4th step is a vital and crucial step. And if you come in the fellowship like I did at 40 years old, and you start remembering every person you had a resentment for, man, there's a lot of writing. And if you don't believe me, just go into your bathroom and do a written inventory on everything that's in your bathroom. Try that one on. It takes time. So I don't believe in this rushing people through their fourth step. We got to learn about ourselves. But it does take courage. And I have to tell you the truth. That was not my experience in my fourth step. I liked my fourth step. I was learning about myself. I was really enjoying my fourth step. So didn't take much courage for me at all, because I was having a really good time doing it. Then we get to step 5. Oh, what does it say about courage? The quality of mind or spirit that allows one to face danger, fear, or difficulties with self-possession, confidence, and determination. Courage does not mean the absence of fear. It is that element which enables us to move past our fears, to do what needs to be done. You know? And that's what courage is. And then when we get into step 5 and we admit to ourselves, to another person, and to the God of our understanding, the exact nature of our wrongs, illuminating every nook and cranny as directed in the book, revealing all, holding nothing back, that takes integrity. Because integrity here is an unbending adherence to honorable principles, strength, soundness, sincerity. And we often hear about it in structural integrity, the structural strength of something. And my integrity bleeds into so many other areas of my life with which I'll get into. But you know, what we're talking about here is an unbending adherence to moral and spiritual principles. And if I'm going to sit down with another human being and tell him everything, you know, holding nothing back, that's scary. But I did that, you see? And I can't tell you how wonderful it was to do, you know? Because for me, step 5 isn't just sitting in front of somebody and reading what I did. That's an ego trip. You know, he told me, bring my character defect list and my fear list, and we'll go over it. And then when I told him the things that he did, he'd stop me. He'd say, okay, well, what fear was behind this? What motivated you to do this? Why did you do this? What character defect might have exasperated the situation from nothing? I had to think about this stuff. The exact nature of my wrong. Not what I did, but the nature behind it. And I have to tell you, he said, Harry, look, before you start, you know, I expect you to tell me some very intimate things about yourself, but I'm going to tell you something about me. And he told me something about himself. Kind of lightweight as far as I was concerned, but for him it was a big deal. And he says, tell me the one thing you thought you would take to the grave. Isn't that interesting? Because it never made my 4th step. I didn't have a resentment towards it. It was just something that I did, which was very, very shameful, you know? And really, as far as I was concerned, spiritually, what's the word? Fatal. Spiritually fatal. You know, I did some very nasty things growing up when I did, doing the things that I had to do in order to survive. And when he said, tell me the one thing you were going to take with you to the grave, I was completely disarmed. I was just prepared to read what I had written. I wasn't prepared to tell him this other stuff, but he nailed me on it. The one thing you thought you would take to the grave, and I told him. And you know, after that, the rest of the 5th step is nothing. It was nothing. We hear people, oh, I spent 6 hours on my 5th step. Not my experience. After I told him that one thing, it was the rest of it, that was a simple thing. I'd go over a few things that my wife did that pissed me off, you know, my ex-boss, my school teacher, this or that, and then I'd get into my part in this. What was, you know, where was I selfish? Where was I dishonest? Where was I self-seeking? You see, the nature of my wrongs. But that was integrity. And then when we get to step 6, we're entirely willing to have God remove all these defects of character. Well, you know, the hint is in there, willingness. Willingness. And as the dictionary describes, willingness is prepared in mind, attitude or manner to proceed in an exercise of free will, readiness deliberateness. Nobody twisted my arm. I was entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. Why not? After talking about them and seeing how they manipulated my life, you bet I was ready to let go of them. God, please, I'm entirely ready. You see, that you should have all of them. And then step 7 is humility. Now, I know outwardly I don't project humble very well. I'm an American. I'm loud, I'm assertive, I'm over the top, I don't dress subtly, you know. What I project outward is not necessarily humility. But then I had this false belief that I knew, you know, who I really was. And I have to say that when I started to look up this word again, I'm not humble at all. And it's something that I really need to work on. Humility, being humble, the absence of self-will, self-pride, or self-assertion, reflecting a spirit of submission or courteous yielding to the opinion, wishes, or judgment or of another. I have a real hard time with that because I'm into combat. You know, it's win-lose, win-lose. It's not win-win. But you know, even when I give somebody permission to call me on my shit when they do it, I want to dispute it. That's not humility. I thought humility was just, well, you know, I'm meek. But that wasn't humility at all. It was my own inner insecurity, and I'm having problems with words right now, but inferiority. You see, it was my innate inferiority and lack of confidence that made me think I was humble. But you see, that's not true. Because when it comes to relationships with other people, I am not humble. I still try to get my way. I still try to get my point across. So this was good as I was doing this because I see this is something I really need to work on. Now, the spiritual principle behind step 8 is forgiveness. I've seen others, I can't remember what they are, but I like forgiveness. Forgiveness, to excuse for a fault or an offense, to grant pardon without harboring resentment, let in a fast pass without punishment. And when I made a list of all these people I had harmed, including the collateral damage, not just the people I had hurt directly, but the people that were hurt as a result of my hurting those that they loved, the collateral damage, I saw a much bigger list actually than my 4th step. Because that's the kind of life I lived. I created an awful lot of wreckage. And in order for me to go, I had to forgive myself for that. I can't rely on anybody to forgive me for that stuff. I had to be able to forgive myself. You see, because I can't be willing to make amends to any person until I do forgive myself. Because if I'm still going out there on a self-seeking, you know, I need your approval so I can forgive myself, I'm leading with the chin, and I'm setting myself up for danger. So the real spiritual principle behind step 8, in making a list of all those persons I had harmed and becoming willing to make amends to them, I had to forgive myself for the things that I had done. And it's not often easy. Some of it takes time. It just doesn't happen overnight. And step 9 I love. Discipline. Step 9 is discipline. Now I've heard other people use the word justice for step 9. I don't like that word because justice is subjective. You know, what's just for me might not be just to the person I'm making amends for, you know, or to. So, you know, justice, yet I could see it. And if that floats your boat, use it. I don't care. Whatever works for you. I'm just giving you the ones that were given to me and how they apply in my life. And discipline is a big one, particularly in step 9. May direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. And that required a lot of discipline. And as it says here, systematic training by instruction and practice, especially to teach self-control or to obtain controlled behavior. And when it came to step 9, and in the 12 and 12, it says, I have it written here because, my memory has been faulting, but it says in the 12 and 12, when we do step 9, a careful sense of timing, prudence, courage. Here it is. Here we go. Good judgment, careful sense of timing, courage, and prudence are qualities that we need for step 9. You bundle those up together, and to me it's discipline. I have to use good judgment. How am I going to make this amends? I know I need to make it, but how am I going to make it? Because honesty is a double-edged sword. It can heal and it can create pain. So, how do I do this amend? How direct is this amend supposed to be? Some amends I had to do by letter because a telephone call would be too intrusive. You see? So I had to make those kinds of amends. And again, it was measured. I wouldn't reveal things that people didn't know to lighten my burden and hurt theirs. That required discipline. So before I went out and actually made these amends, it was necessary for me to really sit down and give some thought to this stuff. How will it best serve the person that I'm supposed to make an amends to? And the part of controlled behavior really comes in because, if I expected other people to welcome my amends, I'm going to be setting myself up for a real resentment. And that's what a resentment is. It's an unmet expectation that I place on somebody else. I'm going with my hat in hand. I'm asking for their forgiveness. I'm willing to make an amends, and they don't take it. How dare they? It's very easy for me to catch an attitude about that. What's your problem, God damn it? I can't do that. And it only happened twice in my amends. It only happened twice. But when it happened, I could feel myself. I was ready to pounce on them. How dare they not take my amend? But you see, I had to exercise self-control. And for me, discipline in my daily affairs is one of the big ones that come up all the time. Because I'm constantly, my default is to react inappropriately rather than to respond. You see? And so what I normally do is I have to discipline myself. And then when we get into step 10, perseverance. To continue onward in spite of obstacles, difficulty, or discouragement. To carry on, to carry through. Isn't it interesting that on page 85 it tells us it would be easy to let up on our spiritual program of action and rest on our laurels? We are headed for trouble if we do, for alcohol is a subtle foe. We are not cured of alcoholism. What we really have is a daily reprieve, contingent on the maintenance of our spiritual condition. Every day is a day when we must carry the vision of God's will into all our activities. It's on page 85, right after step 10. Why is it there? Because I assure you, most people with long-term sobriety, and I'm talking after 3, 4, 5, and onward, will fall out, go out because they stop doing a step 10, step 11, and particularly step 12. And I'll get to that one in a minute. You see, we stop doing our daily inventory. Life takes over. I got to get to work. I don't have time to meditate. I'm tired. I want to go to sleep. I don't have to review my day. I don't want to write this stuff down. And the increments are so gradual we don't see it. Our compass is pointing true north when we're doing the work. But the one time we miss it, it just varies ever so slightly. We don't see it, we don't feel it, because the increments are so terribly small. And then we don't do it the next day, and then the next day, and then the next day. And we just keep doing it and keep doing it and not doing it. And before we know it, we're not even true north anymore. Now we're on a 95-degree angle, heading way off the loop. And I can tell you from my own personal experience, I've done this. And once I found myself doing 95 degrees, it's a bitch to get back to a true 360. Very hard. And that's one of the things I struggle with even today. You know, the discipline that's required in just getting myself to sit down after I wake up and pray to God to remove me of self-seeking and dishonest and selfish motives, to ask for direction for the 24 hours ahead and meditate on it. Sometimes I just don't feel like doing it. But that's where the discipline comes in. I have to do it. And that's where the perseverance comes in. I do it in spite of my difficulties, my laziness. And then we get into step 11, which is God consciousness or spirituality. And as it says here, concept of an ultimate immaterial reality. I mean, what? It's immaterial. I don't see it. I don't feel it. I do feel it. I don't see it. I can't touch it. I can't taste it or smell it. Yet I do believe it's there. An inner path enabling a person to discover the essence of his or her being. That's heavy stuff. An inner path, God consciousness, spirituality, which will enable me to find a much deeper inner meaning to who I am and a greater level of consciousness. You see, finding healing solutions in wellness, personal growth, and relationships. That's step 11, God consciousness, spirituality. And then when we get into step 12, it's service. Service is very simple, helping to achieve a positive result or goal, providing support, encouragement, and or direction, giving one's time freely and when necessary, without necessarily the action, the expectation of payment. We serve because we like doing it. You see? And I have to tell you, when I practice these principles in all my affairs, you know, when I came back from my lowest low, I was basically unemployable. Nobody would hire me because I had such a lousy reputation. I was just too inconsistent. Nobody would give me a chance. But I was one of the best furniture builders around. So what I did was I started my own business. And in the process of making one of my amends to an ex-employer, it landed me a $35,000 job, set me right up in business. And that's what I did just by making that amend. But after that, my entire goal was to be of maximum service to the people that I did work for, to provide them with the best possible product, and to make sure that the recommendation the person gave for me would stand. You see, I wanted to be of service to him. I wanted to be of service to the people in my actions. I am of service to my pigeons. I don't like the word sponsee. I prefer pigeons. There was a term Dr. Bob used, and it was one of endearment. I like pigeons because we train people to carry the message. That's simple. I don't like sponsee. And there's another tag on it. When they're finished with you, they'll shit on you and fly the coop. You know, that's been my experience. And I promise you, if you've been around long enough, you will find that's your experience too. And it's okay. Because, you know, spiritual arrogance steps in. I can't tell you how many times I've taken people through the steps and they have made it. And guess what? I'm redundant. They don't need me anymore. You know, I cut them loose. You know, it's between you and God. But I never hear from them again. And then the ego comes in. And that's where we start to falter, because all these steps are ego-busting steps. They're ego-busting steps. And we break our ego so we can allow ourselves for the wellness of God to enter our lives and do for us what we could not do for ourselves. You see, so when I came in, you know, out of the cold, I wanted to be of maximum service to the people that I did work for and worked with. You see, and I became very, very successful. When I told people I was going to show up between 1 and 1:30, I did. And if I couldn't, they got a telephone call much before then to tell them I'm running late. People appreciate those little things. Service, so important. You know, I have to be disciplined in my behavior towards other people. And that's hard for me because, as I said, my default mechanism is to kick off and react inappropriately rather than respond accordingly. You know, and oftentimes I find myself, I'm running with it, and then I have to stop and I said, God damn it. You know, and then I have to go back and then I have to make an amend. And it's not an apology. I've been apologizing all my life. That's easy. My book tells me when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. I was wrong for yelling at you. I was wrong for responding this way. I was wrong for being cruel. It was inappropriate. I apologize. I will offer the apology, but I have to admit that I was wrong first. That's the part that hurts. And it should, because if it hurts, I'm less likely to do it. Yet I still continue to do it. Maybe I'm a masochist. I don't know. But you see, this is all work in progress. When it comes down, perfect examples, in my relationships, sometimes people piss me off. And I have to be able to tell them. I have to be able to express my truth. So what do? I get honest with myself. And I ask myself, what are my motives here? Is it really to win or make them feel bad because they made me feel bad? Or is it really to get a point across? I have to look at that. And then when I'm clear as to what my motives are, I have to have the courage to stand before that person and do it. Because it's easy to assume, oh, I can't tell her this, or I can't tell him this. We're going to get into a big fight. We're going to get into a big argument. But you have to have the courage to do things. You've got to keep it clear. Because if I don't, I'm harboring a resentment. It's just drips of shit that don't leave, and it just gets in and it just muckies up the water because I'm not keeping things clear within the day. I'm not maintaining my truth, and that's so important. So I have to have the courage, and then even with the courage, I have to have the willingness to do it. See, now there's 2 requirements in the 12th step. This is what I was alluding to before. There's only 2 requirements, and I believe they are requirements. One of them is to try to carry this message to other alcoholics. To try. You see? But the second one is to practice these principles in all our affairs. And that's where I fall, and many other people, through my own personal observation, we falter. Oh, I'm doing a step 10. I'm doing a step 11. Oh, and I'm helping plenty of people. But by the very same token, we are not practicing these things for us, which we need to do for ourselves. And that's the part, there are 3 elements to success. It's like a triangle. And if you're going to succeed in anything, you need all 3 of these elements. Miss any one, and you're not going to do it. The first one is knowledge. You have to have the knowledge of the process in order to get what it is you want to achieve. So you have to know how to do that. You need that knowledge. The second part of that is the motivation. You need the motivation to do it. But the third one is action. If you don't take the action to do it, it doesn't matter how much you know or how motivated you are. If you don't get up off your ass to do it, guess what? You're not going to succeed. Now, I may not have the knowledge. I might have all the motivation in the world, and I may take the action, but if I'm not doing the right thing, it will come back to me, and then I'm setting myself up to get discouraged. And I know how I respond to discouragement. I don't want to try again. You see, and it turns out to be a waste of time if we just go after something with the motivation and the action, but not having the knowledge, taking the time to understand the process of what's required in order to achieve our goal. And it could be the smallest thing to the biggest thing. And then, of course, this other thing which is very important, the motivation, I can take the action. I can have the knowledge, you see, and I can do the work. But as everything, I eventually start to get tired. I become complacent. You see? And then my motivation, my drive lingers and I don't succeed. Only because I sputter. You see? So all these three elements are necessary. And step 10 gives me the willingness. You know, I mean, I look at myself. It gives me the observation as to what I need to do. Step 11 is the knowledge. You know, God, what do you want me to do for the next 24 hours? What would you want me to be? And it is truly amazing. After you've done this for a while, the answers do come, as it tells me in the book. You know, it doesn't always come when I want it to, but they come. And then I know what the next course of action is. So step 10 basically gives me the motivation. You see, step 11 gives me the direction. But step 12, the action, is practicing these principles in my affairs. Because I've seen a lot of people collect pigeons like notches on their belt. There are two kinds of sponsors. Those that sponsor to live and those that live to sponsor. I am neither. More on I sponsor to live, you see? But I don't live to sponsor. I know people out there that, I'm going to help as many people as I can. And in doing so, they're not looking at themselves. And they're certainly not practicing principles in all their affairs because we're too busy running the show for somebody else. That's codependency. That's just another form of illness. You see? And for me, I sponsor for redemption. It's a very personal thing for me and God. Between me and I sponsor people for redemption. Hopefully, that the work that I do, God will recognize that. So when it's time for me to meet him, he might give me some credit for working with this person or working with her. Whether they make it or not is not up to me. It's up to him or them or it. You see? But I dedicate myself to that process. I'm there to serve them. I'm there to serve God. He gave me one of his children to help. You see? I serve myself. And I'm not going to deny the very fact that I do this for me. This is what we mean by, it's a selfish program. It's also selfless, but I do this for me. I had to do the fourth step for my edification. I had to reveal myself to another person for my healing. I had to turn my will and my life over to the care of God for my salvation. I have to constantly do a daily inventory for my edification and for my knowledge. You see? And I have to constantly ask the God of my understanding for direction for me, not for anybody else. And when I make amends, I'm doing it for me. I'm clearing up my side of the street. If I rely upon other people accepting it, I'm setting myself up. And I'm also doing it for self-seeking. You see, it's so easy to let these little things seep in. And I'm having new awarenesses all the time. And I'll end it on this. This is how, it even tells us, going as far back there is a solution. We feel that elimination of our drinking is but a beginning. A much more important demonstration of our principles lies before us in our respective homes, occupations, and affairs. Says it right there. And then, wonderful, now we're into there is a solution. And it says, quite important, no, more on alcoholism, I'm sorry, you'll find it on page 42. Quite as important was the discovery that spiritual principles would solve all my problems. Yep. I have been brought into a way of living infinitely more satisfying and I hope more helpful than the life I lived before. By practicing spiritual principles, I am, in essence, solving all my problems. I have to be honest with myself before I can be honest with another person. I have to be hopeful and optimistic of the future. I have to have faith that the work that I am doing will yield positive results. I have to have courage to take the actions to do it. I have to have the integrity to be honest and straightforward. and do it in such a way where I am not deceiving another person or deceiving myself. Self-deception or deception of another person. You know, I have to be willing to do these things. I have to humbly ask God to remove these defects of character, and that's something I've been finding myself doing each and every day, that 7th step prayer, because I need to do that. I need to be able to forgive myself, because I'm still my own biggest critic and my own worst enemy. I know I'll eventually get a CD and I won't want to listen to it because I hate myself. And as I listen to it, I'm say, God damn it, you forgot this part, or you didn't mention that, you stupid asshole. You see? The negative parent coming out in me. You see, so I have to be disciplined. I have to be able to forgive myself. I have to have discipline, how I approach people, how I do things myself, how I conduct myself. I can't tell you how many meetings I've come in, and then I had to come back the following week to do a step 10. Because I hear stuff in the rooms that really disturb me. And it happened recently. I was at a CA convention a couple of weeks ago, and the Sunday speaker said something which made the hair on my back up. He said, "Meeting makers make it." And I didn't like the son of a bitch anyway. But after hearing that, I wanted to get up off my chair and say, "You stupid ass, it's not the meetings we make, it's the steps we take." But I didn't. I exercised discipline. But each day, I have to persevere because I get lazy, I get tired, I get discouraged, I become complacent, and I just have to keep doing it. You know, I have to keep looking to this God of mine for direction, because Harry is still very powerful. He wants his way, and he's very clever at finding his way in under the radar. So I have to keep myself stuck in this, and of course to be of service. I was supposed to bring somebody with me tonight, but he couldn't make it. And you know something? I had the time of my life. I listened to CDs. I didn't have to entertain anybody. You know, all I did was, oh, I'm driving. And you know something? And it's wonderful to be in a group that understands its primary purpose, because you've said it. We are a solution-based organization. It should be. Each group has but one primary purpose: to carry its message to the alcoholic who still suffers. And if we can do that, then we're doing real good. Because God knows our fellowship doesn't always do it very well. And it's a pleasure for me to be here amongst like-minded people. Thank you very much for enabling me to be the center of attention.